The forest on the colony world was always alive with sound. Tall trees swayed gently in the wind, their leaves glowing faintly in the dusk like lanterns scattered across the horizon. Strange bird-like creatures cried from the canopy, while unseen insects buzzed with a low hum that blended into the night. Ethan Cross had grown used to it all. For him, this remote frontier world was not frightening. It was home. Ethan was a man of quiet habits. He had built his cabin near the river where the soil was rich and the water clear. Most settlers preferred the security of the main colony dome many miles away, but Ethan liked solitude. He had been a scout back on Earth, trained to survive in wilderness, and here he felt free. Every evening he took his rifle not for hunting but for protection and walked the edge of the forest. He studied plants, sketched animals, and made notes about the world. He often said to himself that the forest was like a great library, each path a page waiting to be read. On one such evening, as the sun slipped behind the tall cliffs and the forest deepened into shadows, Ethan heard something unusual. At first it was only a faint cry, almost like the chirp of a wounded bird. But the sound grew sharper, trembling, carrying with it a tone of pain and fear. Ethan froze, listening carefully. He knew every call of the forest, and this sound did not belong. Guided by instinct, he followed the cry deeper into the undergrowth. The ground grew uneven, the air thicker with mist rising from the riverbeds. After a short climb over a mossy ridge, he stopped suddenly. There, in a small ravine below, the earth had collapsed from a recent landslide. Broken roots and scattered stones lay everywhere. Trapped beneath a fallen log was a small figure, glowing faintly in the dim light. Ethan's breath caught. It was not human. The figure was that of a young alien girl, no taller than a human child. Her skin shimmered faintly, as though threads of light ran just beneath the surface, giving her a fragile, otherworldly glow. Her large silver eyes blinked up at him, wide with pain and confusion. Her thin arms struggled against the weight of the log, but she was too weak to move it. For a moment Ethan stood still, torn between shock and wonder. He had never seen this species before. The official colony records mentioned no intelligent tribes in this sector. Yet here she was, breathing hard, her chest rising and falling in panic. The cry he had heard earlier was hers. Without hesitation, Ethan climbed down into the ravine. His boots slipped on the loose earth, but he steadied himself against the wall and hurried to her side. She flinched when he approached, her eyes glowing brighter with fear. She spoke in a language he did not understand, soft and musical, but her trembling hands said enough. She was afraid he meant harm. "Easy," Ethan said softly, kneeling beside her. His voice was calm, the same voice he once used with frightened animals. "I won't hurt you. I'm here to help." The log pinning her was thick and heavy. Ethan pressed his shoulder against it, bracing his feet, and pushed with all his strength. Muscles strained, the log shifted, and with a final heave it rolled aside. The girl gasped as the pressure lifted from her legs. Ethan quickly checked her injuries. One leg was bruised badly but not broken. Scratches ran along her arms, glowing faintly where her blood touched the air. He tore a strip of cloth from his pack and carefully wrapped her leg. She winced but did not resist. Slowly, she seemed to realize he was helping, not hurting. Her eyes softened, though they still watched him warily, like a deer unsure whether the hunter had lowered his bow for good. "Can you stand?" Ethan asked gently. He offered his hand. At first she hesitated, staring at his rough, calloused palm. Then, with surprising courage, she placed her glowing hand in his. He pulled her up carefully, supporting her weight as she leaned on him. She was light, almost too light, as though her bones were finer than human ones. Together they climbed out of the ravine. The forest seemed to hush around them as if watching silently. Ethan carried her most of the way, his strong arms cradling her fragile frame. He spoke softly, telling her simple words, "Safe, friend, help." She did not reply, but she listened, her silver eyes flicking between his face and the forest. By the time they reached his cabin, the stars were high overhead. Ethan laid her gently on a bed made from woven blankets. He lit a lamp and prepared water mixed with a healing salve from local plants. As he dabbed her wounds, she flinched but then relaxed, curious at his careful touch. She tried to mimic one of his words, her voice soft and melodic. "Friend?" Ethan smiled warmly. "Yes, friend." Something shifted in that moment. A bond formed, fragile but real. She trusted him enough to let her eyes close as exhaustion overcame her. Soon she was asleep, her breathing steady, the faint glow of her skin casting gentle light across the cabin. Ethan sat nearby, watching her with quiet wonder. Questions swirled in his mind. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she alone in the forest? He knew she could not be the only one of her kind. The way she had cried out, the way her skin glowed, it all hinted at something larger. Later, when the night was deep and silent, Ethan stepped outside. The forest loomed vast and mysterious. He thought he saw movement between the trees, shadows too tall to be animals, shapes too graceful to be the wind. He listened carefully, and for a brief moment, he heard it, faint voices singing, carried through the trees like whispers. He shivered not from fear, but from the sense that he had stepped into something greater than himself. Saving the girl was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The forest was never truly silent. Even at dawn, when the mist rolled across the river and the trees stood like tall statues, there was always sound. Whispers of leaves, distant animal calls, and the faint hum of glowing insects. Ethan Cross woke early that morning, his eyes heavy from little sleep. He had spent most of the night checking on the alien girl he had rescued. She slept peacefully now, her faint glow softer in the pale light of day. Ethan set a bowl of water and food beside her, unsure what she could eat but hoping she would try. He quietly stepped outside, stretching his arms as the sun rose. Yet even as he breathed the fresh morning air, he felt it again, the strange sense of being watched. It had not left him since last night. The forest seemed alive not only with creatures but with unseen eyes following his every move. By midday he no longer had to wonder. He was stacking wood near the cabin when movement caught his attention. At first he thought it was only shadows between the trees, but then shapes emerged, tall, graceful figures stepping out of the mist. His heart tightened. They were not animals. They were not human. One by one they appeared. A group of women, all of the same kind as the girl he had saved, walked toward him with slow, deliberate steps. Their skin carried the same faint inner glow, though each shimmered in different shades, soft blue, pale green, silver white. Their garments were woven from fibers that sparkled like threads of starlight, flowing around them like living silk. Ethan froze. His hands lowered slowly, palms open to show he meant no harm. His mind raced, but he kept his voice calm. I mean you no harm. The women did not speak in words he could understand. Instead, they sang softly, their voices blending into a haunting harmony. It was not frightening, it was beautiful, like the sound of wind through crystal chimes. As they sang, they looked past him, their glowing eyes settling on the cabin. Ethan turned. The rescued girl had come to the doorway. She leaned on the wooden frame, her leg still bandaged, but her glow stronger now. When she saw the group, her silver eyes widened, and she called out in that same musical language. At once, the women's song shifted. It became brighter, faster. They hurried forward, gathering around her. Gentle hands touched her face, her hair, her injured leg. Relief filled their glowing eyes. Some smiled, others wept softly. Ethan realized they were family, her people. The girl pointed toward him. Her voice rose as she spoke, repeating the human word she had learned. Friend. The women turned to Ethan. Their glowing eyes studied him, and for a long moment, no one moved. Then the tallest among them, clearly a leader, stepped forward. She placed her hand over her chest and bowed slightly. Her voice was low and melodic, carrying both strength and grace. Ethan did not know her words, but he understood the gesture. Slowly, he bowed in return, touching his chest. Ethan, he said, pointing to himself. Then he pointed to the girl. Safe, friend, the leader nodded. That afternoon, the women remained near the cabin. They did not enter, but they sat beneath the tall trees, speaking softly among themselves. Ethan watched them carefully. Their movements were graceful, almost ritual-like, as though each step and gesture carried meaning. They ate nothing he offered, but instead shared fruits and glowing roots they carried with them. As the day passed, they tried to speak with Ethan. They used symbols scratched into the earth, drawings of trees, rivers, stars. They pointed at him, then at the girl, and drew the shape of a heart. Ethan understood. They saw his rescue as an act of honor. Later, the leader beckoned him. With gestures and song, she invited him to follow. Ethan hesitated. The girl looked at him with trust in her silver eyes, then nodded. That was enough. He followed them into the forest. The journey was quiet but filled with wonder. The women walked as if the forest welcomed them. Animals that usually fled from Ethan stood calmly nearby. The trees seemed to bend slightly toward their path, glowing brighter as if greeting them. After an hour, the forest opened into a valley hidden by tall cliffs. Ethan's eyes widened. Before him lay their village. It was unlike anything he had imagined. The homes were not built from wood or stone, but grown from living trees, their branches shaped into arches and walls. The roofs shimmered with leaves that glowed faintly in the twilight. Streams of glowing water ran through the village, and children played beside them, their laughter soft and musical. It was a place of harmony, where nature and life blended seamlessly. The tribe welcomed the girl with cheers and song. They embraced her, covering her with woven cloaks of light. She was safe again. Ethan stood at the edge, unsure of his place. Some women looked at him with gratitude, but others watched with suspicion. Their glowing eyes were sharp, filled with questions. That evening, the leader of the tribe sat with him near a glowing fire. Using signs and careful words, she tried to speak. From what Ethan understood, the girl was important. She was young, but her future was tied to the tribe's survival. Losing her would have been a wound to them all. His rescue was not just kindness, it was a gift they could not ignore. Still, not everyone agreed. A few women argued, their voices firm, pointing at Ethan and shaking their heads. He caught fragments of meaning in their tone. They feared humans. To them, humanity was a race of strangers, dangerous and unpredictable. Why would a human risk himself for one of their own? What did he truly want in return? Ethan said nothing at first. He let them speak, understanding their fear. When silence fell, he placed his hand on his chest again. "No harm," he said simply. Then he pointed to the girl who sat beside him, her small hand holding his. "Friend." The girl looked at her people and repeated it again with all the strength her young voice could carry. "Friend." The leader studied them both for a long time. Then she nodded slowly, her glowing eyes softening. She raised her hands and the tribe fell silent. Her song rose into the night, steady and calm. The others answered with harmony. Ethan did not understand the words, but he felt the meaning. This was not the end of doubt, but it was a beginning. As the night deepened, Ethan sat by the fire watching the glowing village. He knew he had stepped into something larger than himself. Saving the girl had brought him here, to a people hidden in the forest. But trust was fragile, and he could feel the weight of their eyes on him. He wondered what would come next. The village glowed softly beneath the night sky. Homes shaped from living trees shimmered with gentle light, and the sound of song drifted on the air. Ethan sat near the fire with the rescued girl beside him, her silver eyes bright with joy. For the first time since he had found her in the forest, she seemed safe, but peace never lasted long on frontier worlds. The next morning, while the tribe gathered to share food, a sound broke through the harmony of birdsong and flowing rivers. A low rumble rolled across the valley, deep and mechanical, unlike anything natural. Ethan's heart sank. He knew that sound well. It was the engine of a ship. The women looked upward, their glowing eyes wide with alarm. Above the cliffs, a dark shadow swept across the sky. A craft descended slowly, its metal body sharp against the soft beauty of the forest. The symbol painted on its side made Ethan's jaw tighten. Raiders. He had seen their kind before. Men who traveled the stars in search of rare resources to steal, with no care for the lives they harmed. The alien women backed away, gathering children close, their voices rising in anxious song. The rescued girl clung to Ethan's arm, trembling. He placed his hand over hers and whispered, "Stay calm. I won't let them hurt you." The ship landed on a flat clearing beyond the trees. Its ramp lowered with a hiss, and armed figures stepped out. They scanned the valley with greedy eyes. One of them lifted a device pointing toward the streams that glowed with healing minerals. That was what they wanted. Ethan knew what would follow. If the raiders saw the village, they would not only take the resources, but also capture the tribe. His mind raced. The women had lived in peace for generations, blending with nature. They had no weapons, no defenses against such men. This was the moment he had feared, the moment when trust must be earned not by words, but by action. Ethan turned to the tribe's leader, the tall woman whose song carried authority. He tapped his chest and then pointed toward the forest path that led to the raiders. "I fight, protect." She hesitated, her glowing eyes filled with worry. But the girl spoke then. her small voice rising above the fearful murmurs. She repeated the human word she had learned. Friend. The leader met Ethan's gaze. Slowly she nodded. Ethan wasted no time. He scanned the valley for materials. Using vines, branches, and sharpened stakes, he began to build traps along the narrow path leading into the village. The alien women watched in silence at first, uncertain of his strange work. But soon some stepped forward, curious, and began to help. They wove branches with surprising skill, their hands moving as if guided by the forest itself. Together they set snares, pitfall covers, and barricades hidden beneath the glowing ferns. The women's song rose as they worked, not of fear now but of strength, a rhythm that guided their hands. Ethan felt energy in their voices as though the forest itself joined in their defense. By the time the raiders moved toward the valley, the traps were ready. The first raider stepped onto the path, his weapon raised. Suddenly the ground beneath him gave way and he fell into a pit covered with leaves. Another tripped on a vine that tightened around his legs, pulling him into the air. Shouts filled the air as confusion spread. From the shadows, Ethan struck swiftly. He moved with the precision of a trained scout, using the forest as his ally. A branch snapped back like a whip, knocking a weapon from one raider's hand. Stones rolled down the slope, scattering the group. Every step they took forward was met with resistance. Every careless move punished by the traps Ethan and the tribe had built. The alien women did not fight with weapons, but their song grew louder, echoing through the trees. The sound carried power, confusing the raiders and unsettling their hearts. It was as if the very air turned against them. Ethan fought with determination, not for glory but for the people who had trusted him. He dodged a blast of fire from a weapon, rolled into cover, and used his knowledge of the terrain to stay one step ahead. He knew he could not defeat them all, but his goal was not to destroy, only to drive them away. At last, when their leader realized the valley was no easy prize, he shouted for retreat. The raiders stumbled back toward their ship, cursing and shouting. One by one, they vanished up the ramp and the craft rose into the sky, leaving the forest quiet once more. For a long moment, silence held the valley. Then cheers erupted, not loud but musical, as the women's song turned into a chorus of triumph. Children danced, their glowing forms swirling like sparks of light. The rescued girl ran to Ethan, throwing her small arms around him. "You, friend," she whispered again, her voice steady now. Ethan smiled, breathing hard, his body weary but his heart full. "Always," he said softly. That evening, the tribe gathered in the heart of the village. Fires glowed with living light and the women sang songs of honor. The leader stood before Ethan and placed in his hands a woven band made of glowing fibers. It shimmered with the colors of the forest, alive with gentle light. She placed it on his wrist, marking him as kin. The rescued girl stood proudly beside him, her silver eyes shining. The tribe's suspicion had not vanished completely, but it had changed. Where once they saw only danger, now they saw hope. Ethan looked around the glowing village at the women whose songs filled the night, and felt a deep truth settle in his heart. He had come to this world seeking solitude, but instead he had found something greater. By saving one life, he had saved many. By offering kindness, he had built a bridge between species. And by standing with them in their time of need, he had earned a bond that would last beyond any raid or storm. As the stars burned bright above the forest, Ethan knew his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a human alone in the wilderness. He was part of something larger, a bond of trust and friendship between worlds. Word count: 1005.